So welcome to the after lunch portion of the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters Summit. As far as I know, I am still Melissa Everett from Clean Water Action, Clean Water Fund, and I am still, as most of you know, supposed to moderate this thing in a way that moves us forward smoothly and nimbly while making everyone feel completely heard and respected and having a relaxed flow. And not standing here with my phone in my hand, which is tacky. So, is Lou in the room? Yeah, okay. Sorry. You're gonna be on shortly. All right, so this morning we heard a lot of who and what's going on, who's doing stuff. We heard from and met an awful lot of the doers of Connecticut, including Lori Brown from the League of Conservation Voters and her splendid board, who I've gotten to meet a bunch of at lunchtime. Can't do too many shout outs. And this last segment is really about action with a focus on this legislative session. So we all know that we're part of a bigger movement, so we don't have to be slavishly just about the next 3 months, but we do want to be strategic about the next 3 months. Connecticut General Assembly starts February 7th and ends May 9th, I believe. So we're going to have several components here, and including lots of discussion. But just what we've got teed up is Lou Birch, who you heard from earlier from Citizens Campaign for the Environment, talking really like how do you get things done legislatively, what to expect. And Gail Ridge from 350, Ridge, I'm sorry.
Gail Ridge.
My bad. From 350 Connecticut, which is a pretty dynamic group of people. And Ann Hulick, our state director with Clean Water Action. Ann will be, there's great. So Lou's gonna talk about getting things done legislatively. Ann has been coordinating for a long time the Coalition for a Safe and Healthy Connecticut, which gets things done, and she's gonna just share some case material on some successful toxics reduction campaigns. And then Gail is going to facilitate some conversation with legislators, and we'll hear from you on questions, things you want to know, whatever. Lou.
Thank you.
Take it away.
All right, thank you, Melissa. So, as Melissa said, I want to just start by giving a really brief overview of kind of like the most important, thank you, Jonathan, kind of the most important things to know for new advocates that are working on, working on the legislative side in Hartford. There's a few things that you kind of have to have in your quiver when you're going up to the General Assembly with respects to how some of the committees work, what some of the deadlines are, that kind of thing. And so, one of the first things I want to talk about is the public hearing process. So public hearings are held in the beginning of the session. It's an opportunity for the legislature to, the various committees of cognizance, to take comment from the community, from the experts, as well as from the public on these various issues. And this is really the primary opportunity that the public and your groups and all of your members really have to get their voice heard on these types of issues. And so this is something that needs to be highlighted in bold on everybody's calendar. And let folks have their voices heard, let legislators see the passion behind their constituency and really make an impression. Public comment at the public hearing is limited to 3 minutes per person, no matter how many issues you're testifying on. And so there's times when, 3 or 4 of my issues are on the same agenda for a public hearing. I only have 3 minutes to talk about all of them. So it's really, really important at that time to prioritize the comments that you want to make, to summarize those comments to the best of your ability. but to keep in mind that your written testimony can cover much greater level of detail on different issues. It can be submitted after the public comment period, and I think the legislators will agree that this is going to be accessible to members right up until that time in which it's time for them to vote on these issues. So your written comments are really going to be the kind of the your spoken testimony is your opportunity to kind of make a in-person impression, but the written comments are going to be the lasting impression that's on the record for different issues that you're working on. The committees of cognizance are really, really important. Advocates are going to need to establish exactly who the relevant committees for each of these issues are before the session, and then begin to focus first on the leadership of those committees in terms of being able to get the support to get your legislation introduced, get it out of committee, and get it before the full body of the General Assembly. Okay. Some other important details to keep in mind: odd number years are long session, early January to early June for the legislature. This is also the year that the budget for the next biennium is going to be negotiated and passed. Also, individual members are able to introduce legislation during the long session. Okay, so those are the years, right, 2017, 2019. These are the years that you really have an opportunity to identify a champion who might be your legislator, might be another legislator in your area that's passionate about these issues, that has has a concern with their constituents, and you can actually get individual legislators to introduce that bill. Even number years like the one that we're in now are short sessions, runs from early February to early May. Midterm budget adjustments are made during the short session, but all legislation introduced this year has to be done through the committee process. So this is one of those years, especially where it's going to be very, very important for your group to identify the committee of cognizance, the chairs for that committee, and then get your requests in to go and meet with those leadership folks as early as you can. Okay. And to know the committee deadlines. Committees are usually divided into about 2 different tracks for alternating schedules. Committee bill deadlines, raised bill deadlines, and joint favorable deadlines can be found online. The schedule actually looks something like this. Okay, and this can be found on the Connecticut General Assembly website. It's got all the different committees and the deadlines that you have to have things done by. So just to give you an idea, okay, the proposed bill deadline, this is going to be very, very general statement of intent of what the committee wants to do. The deadline for that is going to be February 9th. It's just a few days after the start of the legislative session. Then you have your committee bill deadline, which is actually going to be February 22nd. Okay, and so that's the time that the committee has to actually get out more fleshed out versions of those proposals. They have until February 22nd. So in the short legislative session, it's a pretty short time window, and you have to act pretty quickly. Okay, and then, of course, the joint favorable deadline, which is the deadline by which those bills have to be voted favorably out of those committees in order to be considered by the full General Assembly, is actually going to be March 15th of this year. Okay, you can find this information, and this is something that you folks might want to write down, but you can find this information as well as a number of other resources on the CGA website. That's cga.ct.gov. Okay, and that's, again, Connecticut General Assembly is what CGA stands for. And this is the online portal. It's a one-stop shop for schedules, committee information, including membership, the deadlines, the schedules we talked about, public hearing testimony can be viewed there, and as well as basic and advanced legislative document searches. So if your group is interested in a particular issue and you want to see if there's legislation that's already been introduced, you can search in your relevant terms and that kind of thing, figure out if there's anything out there. And advocates can also sign up for bill tracking so that they can get notification whenever those bills have been acted upon. It's the single most important resource on the web for advocacy groups in Connecticut. Definitely explore it, get to know its features, and refer to it often for updates and for the legislative calendar. And so there's a few other things that my colleagues are going to want to talk about in terms of staying tuned in with the groups. I'm not sure who's going to take a second. Gail, are you next? So I'll pass it off to Gail. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shall I go second? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a question. How many languages are spoken in Connecticut?
24.
148. All right, how many continents does the soils of Connecticut represent? 3. Africa, there's parts of Africa here, there's parts of the Eurasia continent and North American continent. We may be a tiny state, but my God, we are very diverse, both culturally, geographically, environmentally. And, you know, when I was asked to step up to speak to you, I was thinking about this diversity. And diversity needs careful management of communication. You know, we all come to the table with different backgrounds, different viewpoints, different outlooks, different belief systems. And when we communicate among ourselves, it's important that when you are addressing somebody, you're certain that what you're saying is actually being received by the person in the same manner. So I think in politically lively environments such as we have here in Connecticut, which is, you know, vital, it's something that you need to consider. I'm originally from dear old England, as you can hear from the accent, and etiquette is very important. Politeness, consideration of people's time is a lubricant in which you can exchange information very quickly and very succinctly and very easily if it's appropriately managed. So I think the ability to communicate is extremely important, and the consideration of your listener is also very important. As far as a legislator is concerned, I may be guessing in this, but I think basically a legislator's life, and we have several legislators here in the room who can certainly refute what I'm going to say or bounce with this, is that it's a reactive, proactive environment in very tight time frames. And so as a citizen, you need to consider that a legislator, the last thing they want to hear is an essay or a soapbox speech. They want to hear the bullet points. And if it is something that they can work with, then the legislature will stop you and say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this. Now, we have a couple of legislators here. Jonathan, do you agree with the life of a legislator? What is it? What is life like?
So much in your head. You're experts, you know your communities, you know your causes, and you can actually become totally frustrated and not use that time effectively. Now, I'm not saying that you have to dumb it down to a third grade level to get through to a legislator, but it's a good idea along the lines of what you say is think about what are the key salient points you want a legislator to take away. Yeah, honestly, sometimes we're busy checking on our phones or our computers, other things. What's going to make me suddenly turn my head up and pay attention to what you have to say? The 3 minutes of testimony is only the beginning of the engagement with the committee if you're effective. I've seen somebody give a 3-minute speech which is so effective in piquing the interest of legislators from both sides of the aisle, that person's up there for the better part of an hour. That's being effective. What you want to have in your testimony is you want to seed it with things that are galvanizing, that are fresh, that are data-driven, that tell stories about people. You need to use that 3 minutes, not necessarily to tell the whole story, but to engage the legislative members to the point where they care enough to want to keep talking with you until they get the answers that they want. So, yeah, we're distracted. We're in and out of there. We're often in committee meetings in 2 different rooms at the same time. Sometimes we're eating lunch. We're human beings. But if you understand human behavior, the basic levers of getting somebody's attention actually work with legislators as well.
Let me just add one thing from my, thank you, Jonathan, that was perfect, and just from my own personal experience and preference, is you might not want to lobby legislators when they're in the bathroom or in the cafeteria. Just my own.
I also feel you need to know yourself well when you're preparing your elevator speech of 3 minutes. Ballpark number of words is 300 words. And rehearse them in front of a mirror and speak at your comfortable rate of speech. I've been to testimony situations in Hartford, and you can clearly see somebody who is literally packing as many words as they can into 3 minutes, and it becomes this breathless blur of information. They're just sort of like a machine gun. You don't want that. You want to deliver your comments and thoughts carefully and slowly so that people have time to digest it. So never rush your speech. Would you agree with that? Yeah. You appreciate time when people enunciate and bring their thoughts in a condensed form. Yes. Okay, Anne, what about you? Do you want to add?
Well, I just want to back up and just ask you all again who is new to this event today. Oh, so yeah, so many of you. I was sitting more up front, so I couldn't see how many of you were new, but I see a lot of my friends and colleagues that I work with, but I'm so thrilled to meet all of you who are excited and want to get engaged. So I really applaud you. And so I was just asked to speak a little bit about how to run effective campaigns. So a lot of my colleagues, I'm not the only one that runs successful coalitions in the state. We all do. I work closely with Lou and all of the other advocates in the room. But what I want to spend a few minutes on is maybe give you all some tips who haven't been involved in this kind of work before that might be helpful to you so that you can continue to work and do even more on the issues that you care about in this upcoming legislative session and beyond, quite frankly. Because oftentimes campaigns don't win in the first year, or the first 2 years or 3 years. But what's important is that you're building up your group's issue in a credible and fact-based manner and educating policymakers and shaping policy going forward. So what I've learned over the years in working with coalitions is working with diverse groups and partners that all care about a particular issue. So I'll just pick one that we worked on, many of you in this room, which was BPA. Connecticut was one of the first states to ban, well, was the first state to ban bisphenol A, a very toxic chemical, from baby bottles, sippy cups, and other recyclable containers, as well as infant formula containers. And how did we get that done? We had a very large group of advocates, so people from all walks of life that cared about this issue. I was really pleased, and I say this all the time, that our coalition was comprised of every group from Planned Parenthood to the Archdiocese in Hartford. So this was an issue that people just really cared about. It wasn't about party lines or anything. It was an issue about public health. And many of the issues that we talked about this morning in terms of the environment and climate change are really about public health when you think about it. Climate change is the #1 most pressing public health issue of our time. So think about the ways that you can really galvanize your advocates and other groups and get them involved. The legislators, and what Jonathan and Gail and Lou said was so right on. The legislators are really, really busy, and they deal all day, every day with professional lobbyists that are lobbying them for a variety of issues that they're hired by their clients to get passed. The benefits that you all bring to this effort and to campaigns, I think, is so important. And it's that you are, regular citizens, people out there, students, people affected by the issues that you mentioned, and you really care and are experts in talking about how these issues affect you and why you want to advance policy. So what you bring to the lobbying effort and to a campaign is real. You're not hired lobbyists. You are people that passionately care about the issue. And I think Jonathan would agree with me that that is really powerful when you can take your time to come up to the Capitol or call your legislator and meet with them and talk about the issues and why a policy that you're advancing is important, has real weight. And that's what we were successful in doing with the BPA ban. We mobilized advocates from all different sectors, from all different backgrounds, from all different labor groups, faith-based groups, environmentalists, public health advocates, to talk about why they were concerned about exposure to BPA. And we used a lot of tactics to gain their attention. So always coming, again, I think Jonathan said this, with science, with research. Commissioner Klee mentioned that this morning. I'm a nurse by background. We really rely on the science and the evidence. And if you can speak credibly to that, you know more oftentimes than the legislators do about the issue that you care about. So use your expertise and your knowledge of the science and the facts to educate people that can help to make the change. The other thing that I think was really helpful in the BPA campaign was we used a lot of media. So we had a lot of events throughout the course of the legislative session. And all of the groups in this room do this all the time. We hold press events. But again, what grassroots groups like yourselves can do, and it's really, really powerful, is get your colleagues together, get your other UConn students together. Hold an event, and we can all help you with this, where we can get some press there, where we can help you to elevate your issue and hopefully get it into the news or the printed media or the television or whatever, to highlight and broaden it. So we did a lot of that, and we made them fun. We were very concerned about BPA, so we brought in kids, we brought in moms, we brought in, people with their kids who could really testify and speak to why they were concerned. We brought in nurses and physicians, so all different groups that could speak about why this was such an important policy issue. And then also using media, got our advocates to write quick letters to the editor. Susan, I'm looking at you because she was super helpful with this. Oftentimes we can help you ghostwrite them or teach you how to do that. But getting your issue out there into the printed media, again, just helps others get involved and get engaged. And certainly we have the advent of social media now, and I think there's great opportunities with social media, obviously. It really helps you to spread the word and get people engaged, and you know way more about this than I do. I mean, I use it, but you're way better at it than I am, certainly. But there is a very important role for social media as a tool, but it should never take the place, I think, and please correct me, Jonathan, and others if I'm wrong about. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. If I'm wrong about this, but I think a personal touch, a call from you all as new advocates to your legislator and say, can I meet with you for 5 minutes and talk to you about why I care about this issue, is more effective than a pre-filled out action alert. Is that right? Would you, please.
Hi everyone, oh wait, I got one right here. Thanks, Lou. Hi everyone, I'm Kristen McCarthy-Vahey. I represent Fairfield, and I am sorry I missed earlier. Mary Hogue, who is from Fairfield, has promised to catch me up. But as I'm sitting here, you probably didn't see me because I had my head in the phone texting about a 2 o'clock meeting that I have to run back. And how many of you have already lobbied in the legislative office building before? So many of you, and there are a bunch of you who haven't. I would concur. I say when we come to the legislature, we almost have to learn how to be rude or to do things that my mother taught me never to do, which is when someone's talking to me, to hold my phone and be texting someone else, or while someone's presenting, that I'm sending texts and then leaving early after coming late, things like that. But yes, I think maybe not a third grade level, fourth grade maybe for information. You almost always do know more, and I see other representatives, Mary Mashinsky and Adam Dunsby, and Rep. Reyes, there he is over there. But I do think the personal connection, the sense of, clear outline of points, but also having that one-on-one relationship. I often tell people, if you're a strong advocate on an issue, your legislator should know who you are, and they should know you. And in other words, in Fairfield, I know on these issues, I'm going to call Mary, because Mary's amazing, but Mary also has developed that relationship. She's been a leader. She's been a source of information that we can count on. And as an advocate, I think that's really important, is to literally develop that personal relationship.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think as you all being new to this kind of work, that personal relationship is so important. Again, you may not get something passed in the first year, but if you're developing a relationship with your legislator and educating them about the issues that you care about, and also letting them get to know you as an advocate, as a citizen, as their constituent, as a nurse, as a student, as a, whoever you are. I think that cannot be underestimated, and that's my only concern with social media, that we rely on that a lot, and it's a great tool, but don't let that take over the other very important piece. Let me see, is there anything else? I think that's, I would say that with the BPA campaign, utilizing all those things and just expanding, pulling in people to that campaign, educating them on how to lobby. When they come up to the Capitol, how do you pull a legislator aside and talk to them? All of us here want to help you to do that and get real comfortable with that. I know when I first started, and I was much older, I'll say in midlife, I was a nurse for many, many years, and had no problem at all calling a neurosurgeon or a cardiovascular surgeon and saying, hey, my patient needs this, and I need you to do this right now. But when I got in front of a legislator, I was intimidated. And then I thought, well, why? Because you have the skills to advocate, because you know the issue, as they all said, often better than they do, because they have so much on their plate. So trust yourself, trust your knowledge. Thank you for being engaged and here today, and reach out to any of us to help you with anything along the way. We work on our issues, but we want, we are all in this together. So I'll just leave it at that.
Beautiful, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I was wondering if Anne would talk about all the plastic ducks and colorful posters and toys and things that I always walk into the office and go, now what's that one about? But just to say that it's partly a game of attracting attention in an elegant manner and in an unexpected manner. One line. We had part of our theme for the BPA was plastic ducks, kind of the iconic children's toy that we know are made with these toxic chemicals. And Lou and Susan will remember these well. So, boxes and boxes of plastic ducks. So we had lots of plastic toy ducks, and rubber ducks, thank you. And it just became a visual theme. Like if I had a duck, or if I was testifying, I'd put the duck, we'd all put our ducks on the thing. In a row.
Yeah.
And it just became like a talking point, right?
And then people inevitably are like, well, what's in the duck? And you're like, well, we don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to bring attention to.
Right.
So the visuals can help sometimes in that respect as well.
And I just have to put in a plug for our former Senator, President Pro Tem Donald Williams, and he told me that, he told all of us that at one point, that kind of street theater, or that kind of symbol of your campaign becomes a talking point and a helpful tool. So I thought, we didn't do too bad then. We did pretty good, right? So,
There you are.
yeah.
Okay,
so,
thank
and the
you.
bill passed, first in the country, so.
Okay. All right. All right, we have a half hour left in our formal time together. So really, you have a consulting firm here. And you should take greedy advantage. Not just abstract questions, like what do you think about? What do you need for each person in this room to just rock for the next 3 months? What kind of help do you need? What kind of questions? What kind of professional development? What kind of support? Let's hear from as many of you as possible. Yeah. And say your name, please, and shout out.
Talking about public hearings, and the public hearing format has to change, and change radically. And we should make sure as a group it does change. This idea that the legislature speak first has to go. These guys and ladies have opportunity to talk to those people in front of you at work on work time. Individual citizens are there on their own time, not getting paid. We have to stop the lobbyists from speaking at public hearing number 2. They are on paid time and they are not really the public. We have to stop this thing of chairmen having their prize speakers stay up there for an hour while 25 people that are waiting to speak end up leaving because it's 3 hours later. That practice has to stop. We have to stop the practice of pre-sign-ups. Because that lets the lobbyists sign up first, and well, maybe let's...
Oh, no, we can't stop that. I like that. Sorry.
And I want to say, don't be shy of any of you about changing how this system works.
Okay, thank you.
There used to be a system where you could go into a public hearing and there'd be 8 or 9 lobbyists signed up on one side of an issue. People went to leadership, get a change. And leadership said, no, it's chairman can decide. And guess what? I went around that building ripping up the sign-up sheets. And that's the only way it changed.
Okay, thank you. Next. Will Elise.
My question is, how do you get legislators to really care about an issue that they have no idea about? And how do you get someone to really feel passionate and enthusiastic about supporting something when, you know, at the end of the day, people don't know what they don't know? And just for example, right, so today, and I live in Hartford, as I was pulling into the overflow parking here, and then I was walking back, and I was looking down, and I was like, oh man, there's so much trash on the floor. Oh my God, that's horrible. But as someone who lives in Hartford, that's not what my city represents to me. And I care deeply about my city. And so the thing that immediately came to mind was, I hope that the folks who are attending the summit don't think that that's all of Hartford, because that is not reflective of who we are as a community. And there's a lot of love for the city, and there's a lot of work to be done. And just because there's litter on the floor. But with that mental image, you know, people might not know what they don't know. And so how do we get people to really consider a topic when they might not know enough about it? Even when at times, so for instance, if it's a topic, I'm just gonna throw another idea out there, when it's a bill that that's specifically for cities and not necessarily for other towns, how do we get other legislators to really feel invested or to consider what you have to say?
Thank you. So let us, you guys go ahead, but then I'm guessing there's some wisdom in the crowd on that as well. Anyone comment?
Who's going to take this one?
So, thank you, Will Elise. I'm going to take a step back and actually add a wrinkle to your question, because I think that you've hit on a really important issue here that we're dealing with more and more. especially because of the fact that many of us in the room are science-based organizations, and we're living in a political universe where it seems that fewer and fewer of our elected officials actually believe in science. So the question that we've kind of been grappling with over the last year to 2 years, as we've seen things changing, is how do we get through to the other side, right, as well as the usual suspects? And I think that a big part of this comes back to the discussion we had a little bit earlier about building those personal relationships with those legislators. Because I've found, particularly when you're talking to a legislator that may have historically been on the other side of an issue from you, that typically, you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes. They get a lot of folks that come through their doors that ask them for things, right? And that say, well, this is our issue, we want you to work on this. And sometimes we get upset and we get frustrated at them when they don't agree with us. And so one of the things that I think is really valuable in terms of building relationships with those legislators and helping them and getting them to take a minute to allow you to explain your issue usually starts with, again, building that personal relationship. So as opposed to, hi, my name is Lou, I'm your constituent, and I'm here to ask you for X, Y, and Z, you may want to start out by saying a little bit about your personal story. What is it that motivates you to do this work? What is it that brought you up to Hartford in the first place? You might then want to talk about an issue that you and that legislator have in common, right? And so you're not creating an adversarial dynamic. And this might go a little bit against what we were talking about before about keeping it short and to the point. But you're talking about building relationships with new legislators here. And another thing that I think can be really useful is to also include in that conversation, you've heard my priorities, now can you tell me a little bit about what are some of the things that you care about, right? So now you're creating a two-way conversation as opposed to just this dynamic where I'm here to ask you for something. So I think that that's very valuable as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think
a couple of points. I want to just crowdsource a little bit. Mary?
Yeah, I have to be candid and say that the number one influence on the legislator is their own constituents. So ideally, you'd say, I'm from your district, here's what I want you to do. And that's the number one most powerful influence. Now, if you're an urban legislator in an urban district and you're outvoted by the suburban districts, which is the case in Connecticut, then you need a larger coalition that reaches into the suburbs. For example, if it's a public health issue, you can coalition with church groups. They will have a social conscience, and you'll be able to recruit some of them from suburbia to help you present your issue, simply because of human decency between the coalition members. So always try to think of how you could broaden your coalition so that you're reaching out further into the state of Connecticut. And that's hard for people to do. When I first was an activist before I was a legislator, I had to learn how to work with coalitions. And coalitions, you respect what each member of the coalition is working on, and you have to give and take with them. So they may say, I'll help you with your bill this year, but next year, would you help us pass this issue that's important to us? We're working on opioids, or we're working on something else. And will you help us next year on our issue? And that's how it works. You give and take with members of your coalition. If they may say, I want you to come to a press conference and stand with me, you don't even have to say anything. Just stand with me while we do our press conference as a coalition member, and then you do that. So then you're much more powerful because now you're a bigger organization. You can work the Senate and the House. You can work more than one legislative district. So coalition building is critical. And I also want to, for the previous question, I want to chime in that street theater is wonderful. And I use it myself. And a little bit of street theater goes a long way. You can get on TV, on the nightly news with your issue, with just a little creativity and a 30-second message.
And actually, I want to take the liberty of just a couple of real quick observations. I always thought that I was enlightened as a European Caucasian person about racial issues, but the moment that I really went holy moly in terms of racial issues was when I was involved in an education campaign where I was invited to do a speaking tour hosted by historically black colleges and universities in the South, where I was in a bunch of big auditoriums and I was the only white person in the room. And it was like, ah. And I think direct experience, that whenever you can not just be telling, but showing, one of the ways that just the basic issue of waste and pollution was brought forward, by our movement like a generation ago. Remember the dumpster dive? You actually go out in a parking lot, empty a dumpster, and see what's in it. AIDS as an issue was so invisible. Remember the AIDS quilt, Vietnam Wall? I mean, all of the ways of taking the issues symbolically and viscerally and putting them into public spaces, and you have to build a relationship, but take your legislator on a walk. I mean, there's got to be walking tours of Hartford that show the heart of Hartford and the heart and soul of Hartford, and get people not bothering to think about the trash because they're so much more important. Mary.
So I live in Hartford, and I've worked on the North Branch of the Park River for about 10 years, and have had a hard time just getting funding for that site-specific project, which is actually a very doable project. And so I think some of the ways that really could help transform the movement of this in the state, in the LOB, right, is to bring things home to districts. And for instance, we have a lot of state properties just along the North Branch that are UConn Law School is there, or CSCU, the Connecticut College, State Colleges and Universities property, and what we've seen at UConn stores where they had the LEED rating system and how transformative the green infrastructure has been on their campus, but they're still working on the maintenance issues. So I think if the legislators and the lobbyists would just also remind and kind of push for those changes on state property, I think that would be a good thing. And also just keep in mind that there's people working on things locally that may not be a statewide program, and you could just say, hey, I know Mary, she's in your district, and the North Branch is worth doing. So thanks.
Thank you. Great. Let's see. We're going to bias toward newbies.
We are trying to get citizens to make phone calls, so a little different than a group advocating for legislature. But we'd like to advocate from a citizen level. So I had a question for the representatives. On the national level, we've been calling our senators and congressmen, and they tell us that that's the best thing for us as their citizens to do. Is it the same for the state reps? I mean, we would like to meet with them, but not everyone we ask to make phone calls is going to want to meet with their rep. So we were going to suggest that they make a phone call, name, address. I'm in your district. This is what I think. So I get that it's personal, but can it work? Is it effective for you guys if someone from your district calls you and says, I would like you to vote on this bill, and this is why?
I find that the least effective method for a couple of reasons. Our time is limited. We're dependent on our aides sometimes to assemble comments we get from constituents. And now you're putting the pressure on the aide, who actually in the House may be working for 4 other members, to capture exactly what you said, get it on paper, and get it in front of me. If I get an email, if I get a letter, which is even more personal sometimes, then I'm going to have it in front of me, and I'm going to probably spend more time on it. I'll tell you, sometimes phone calls end up in the ether or on the voicemail, and I don't get them until maybe well after they're all that useful. So I don't find that phone calls are all that helpful.
Great, thank you, Mary.
I think the email is probably the best, because when we're sitting in the hearings or the committee meetings or in the chamber, we're also reading our emails simultaneously. So we are. No, I'm not. We're doing like 5 things at once. So. The national reps say, I want a phone call, because their staff, I guess, really does. Yeah, they have more staff than we do. We're sharing, a 1/6 of a staff person. So the emails are good, and you can send them directly to us. And then when we go into debate, we can say, this, you know, I got 40 emails on this, overwhelming support from my district.
Thank you. Okay. Other, did you want to do a quick?
I'll just do one quick. I think that actually I'm Melissa Schlag. I work for Connecticut Fund for the Environment, Save the Sound, in the communications department. And I'm also a selectman in the town of Haddam. But one thing I think that summarizes everything that you've all said is the rule in politics is touch somebody 7 times and they'll vote for you. That's the same thing I think with lobbying. You know, touch them 7 times, whether it's a phone call, an email, a text, in person, or a personal letter. I think all of that has to be done in order for them to really hear you and understand you. And I'm also in charge of taking a 5 or 6 page legal brief and condensing that down into a fact sheet. I think that's also important when you're lobbying your legislator. Give them something colorful with some graphs and some numbers, not a lot of words, because they get stacks and stacks every session that they have to wade through. And if yours is interesting looking, they're going to read it. So that's my advice.
Great point. Thank you, Melissa.
Okay. What else do you need from the consulting firm?
The Brain Trust.
The Brain Trust. It really is awesome. Let's see. Who hasn't?
Alex has a question. I don't think he spoke.
Okay. Well, Ben.
Ben?
Then I'll come back to you.
I don't know if I need it, but just something I wanted to mention that hasn't been mentioned is that the trend in Connecticut is everything gets done on the last day. And it's super frustrating because, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm misrepresenting and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but like very few legislative things get voted on and passed except for the last day of the session. And a lot of things run out of time, which is unfortunate, and like we should find a way to change that. But I just want to manage expectations here that if we're pushing for certain legislation, you have to keep on it because it's not done until the last day of the session in most cases.
And you have to have reliable sources of information about where things are moving, and I find that really hard because all the reliable sources are scrambling themselves. Did you have a question or a comment?
Let me just add one thing before you go on. And I agree with everything that Ben said, and I would also just ask people to manage expectations in terms of the time that some of these issues take, okay? Ben just hit on a very important issue, is that some of this stuff, you know, high priorities that the leadership folks, they want to do, that stuff is going to get done. It's going to be the more controversial issues. It's going to be some of the environmental issues that may not have broad-based support on the whole legislature that are going to get pushed further and further back. And so you have to understand, while, you know, you are investing a lot of your personal time and energy into these campaigns, some of these big ticket issues don't take one legislative session to affect change. And so sometimes you have to take the long view as well. Did you have something you wanted to add to that, Gail?
Yeah, basically, in a nutshell, persistence. And also, when you're working with legislators, speak with them, not at them. You know, I'm a scientist. My craft is language and words. And we can worry a single word for the hours to, you know, oh, well, what does this mean? Should it mean this? Should it mean that? So, you know, I think it's extremely important that you always bear that in mind, that you're working with somebody and not at them, and I think they would appreciate that.
I just want to ask the legislators if there's anything that we have not yet asked that we should. So what advice do you maybe have that we should know?
And legislators, I know Jonathan, Mary, who else is still in the room? I'm sorry. Great. A quiet legislator, would you like to?
I walked in late, so I don't have an answer to that question. So I don't know what you asked before I got.
Oh, just basically working the legislature effectively during the session. You know, what makes you happy when a constituent does it? What makes you crazy when a constituent does it? I'll get back to us.
It made me crazy. I mean, I'll just, since I'm being asked to go some general comments, which echo what Representative Mashinsky said, and I think the other representatives here. I mean, the first best path is always to approach a legislature if you're a constituent. I mean, when I get an email from a constituent, I almost always respond. It's very rare that I don't find the time to respond, or the tone is such that it doesn't seem warranted. If I get an email from someone who's other side of the state, I typically don't, because my thought is, well, they have a representative or a state senator. They really should go to them first and see. So, and that's the point goes to your question too. And I agree with Representative Steinberg to a degree that just general phone calls probably don't have a huge impact. I should also point out too, I think I'm the most junior person. I've been in the legislature just over a year, so all these other guys know a lot more than me. But I think I would be hard pressed to believe that any legislature would ever turn down a request from a constituent for a meeting. So even if you're working with a group, an interest group that has a particular cause in mind, if you have someone from that group who is in the legislature district who you would like to speak with or get access to, I think that the smart thing to do is trying to get that constituent to set up a meeting and then try and bring more people. I think working through the constituents, I mean, we all get here because we're elected. There's certain realities about being here and being legislature. So everyone wants to do what they can for their constituents, and that's really, 60, 80% of the job is serving your constituents. So that's my recommendation and my overall comments for my later on. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Mark.
There are so many issues that this group is interested in pursuing, and we have a legislative session coming up, and I feel like we sometimes go at the legislature scattershot. And I don't know if there's a simple answer to this, but how do we coordinate better on the couple of bills the couple of issues we might want to push?
You know what? So are people from the three panels still here? Okay, you were water, correct? Okay, anybody from the land, Margaret's here, anybody from the land panel still here? Karen, okay, wonderful. And sorry if I'm like completely disoriented and not seeing you right in front of my eyes. And energy, yeah, exactly. I mean, so would we say clearly renewable portfolio standard? David, something about land use and siting, or no, we don't know, who knows? There is a list of energy bill interests that I think is in your packet, that just a framework and bills that have been in and out over the last couple of years with some contact people from the various organizations. Water, just quick summary.
Water advocates, as you could tell from the panel, are pretty tight, and we're used to working together, working with Lou and Ann. And I'm with Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. Our email is on our website. Even my cell phone number is on our website. We also have a helpline, which please don't use unless it's a real emergency before 5 a.m. But we really will, and I think most of the people here, if you have a water issue, we will try, if it needs a policy or legislative, we will try to be sure your voice gets heard in the right place. It might be CEQ, it might be with your legislature, it might be with the agency, and we typically talk and interact and work together and can tell you which bills have momentum and which don't, and give you an idea of your possible success or not. So water is, we're very solid. We're not a liquid, we're solid.
They're in the flow. Hold up that handout.
So there is a list of organizations working on water issues on this flyer here that is in your packet. So if there are issues that you have an interest in, you can contact your local water organization. And Rivers Alliance is the primary advocacy organization working on solely water here in Connecticut. So
great. And is the water and public trust and validation or adoption of the state water plan likely to be, do you think, a priority? In a big way?
Melissa,
yes.
Can I just I think Mark brings up a really good point. Something that I've felt too when I started this work was that we're all in our groups and everybody's doing good work, but we have, so many issues that we're all working on, and is there a way for us to get better coordinated and support each other in a better, more cohesive fashion? And I really think Lori and the League has done a tremendous job of helping us as, really, Lori is a tireless advocate. And I think we have all, this is just my opinion, having done this now for 6 or 7 years. I feel that we have become even stronger and more coalesced as environmental advocates. And I think we've all also been very much obviously aware, as you all are, about the dire issues that our legislators are dealing with the budget and things like that, as well as the dire situation of climate change. And so for me personally, I feel, and you may all disagree, I feel like as environmental advocates, we've done better in the last couple of years, really not having 100 issues per se that we're trying to run, but really thinking very strategically, even if it's kind of out of our normal boundaries of where we work. I may spend less time on toxics, for example, because I know it's not the highest of priorities right now. You know, maybe water is. So how can we be helpful? And I just feel like that's been positive for us as a state, and particularly going into a short session. I think it really is important for us all as advocates to think about how can we support these top, 3 area issues, not to say that another issue is not as important, but just to be really thinking about how you can plug in. And Lou reminded me that we all send out action alerts on things that we're working on. So if you sign up for our emails and things like that and get those, even that's a helpful way that you can stay plugged in and advance an issue that you may care about that may not be a top priority that gets past this session per se.
Yeah, and you actually have in your package the 350 notes for how to work with legislators, and you can certainly use that as a guide. Onward and upward.
Yes, thank you. Anyone who has not spoken, got any brief one-line comment?
Hi all, thanks for coming. Is that good enough? You can reach out, I think it's been repeated on and on, to any of us. And as Gail said, some of the organizations are on that pink sheet. Lori and her great organization of LCV, 350, Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, most certainly, Lou Birch's organization. Many of them are already listed. So please, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're all willing to help. It's no reason you go alone on this path.
Thank you. All right, my final 2 words: nurture yourself and everybody around you. Thank you.